shares of Microsoft dropped about 10% following the latest earnings report, and the stock is now at a pretty interesting juncture, so here's an update. First of all, if we look at just the pure stock price itself, just to understand what happened, the stock essentially put in what's called a double top formation between the highs in July and sort of the double topping of that in late October of last year, and ever since the stock's basically been going down. I'll show you our momentum model, how the momentum model gave us a sell signal just in time there. The stock now has dropped to right to the up gap of the May of last year earnings report. So that's this empty space right down here right now. So essentially now traders and investors are kind of stuck with this. Can't get my face onto this thing here. Anyway, so right now, investors are kind of stuck with, or traders at least in the shorter perspective, are kind of stuck with, is he going to fill this gap or not? Luckily, we don't really have to make a choice, because we can actually, using a process, make a better educated guess. So first of all, just understand that from a trend following perspective, the shares of Microsoft in, let's call it early January, early this year, finally and officially exited a bullish trend phase. That bullish trend phase started in July. It exited again early January, so clearly it wasn't a very good bullish trend, but nonetheless, it only was a minus 3.5% loss if someone would have bought from a trend following perspective, multi-quarter, multi-month, and would have exited now. So no harm, no problem, no one double ticked it up here, so that's important. So we're now basically in a neutral trend, no longer a bullish trend. That's very important to understand from a longer term, multi-quarter trend following perspective. However, in the near term, and this is really, really important, as I just showed you before, momentum actually flipped to the bearish side in early November. So specifically on the 5th of November, the stock turned into a bearish momentum phase, that down arrow, and you can see we are still in a bearish momentum phase. In other words, there's no new buy signal, there's no up arrow or no green up arrow anywhere. And since that signal, the stock is down about 14, let's call it almost 14 and a half, 16, 15%. So in other words, I don't really have to guess here. Or what I do know is that momentum remains bearish. We have a neutral trend. So the odds do favor ultimately for the stock to fill that gap that I just showed you guys before. Whether it does it or not, we don't know for sure, but we do know that momentum remains bearish. The stock is neutral. So it's probably not a stock to buy for the long term yet. That can certainly change. And it's certainly not yet time to buy it from a momentum perspective. Otherwise, we would have a green arrow here in the upside. So hopefully this helps you guys a little bit with what a process can do to be able to look at the markets through a more open-minded, a repeatable process, rather than constantly having biases based on whatever latest research we read or whatever views we have. I think the markets, it's really critical to approach the markets through that open-mindedness, again, being open-minded to the outcome and not having to constantly let greed and fear sort of cloud our reviews. Hope it helps. We'll see you in the next video.